At number 39 on the iconic 100 list is the 1997-98 EX-2001 Michael Jordan Jambalaya, a card that I can just tell you right now that both Jeremy and I love. And here to talk about this card today is Jeremy Lee from Sports Cards Live. Jeremy, 39 is, I think, an awfully high number for an insert card. It's one of the highest insert cards on the list. What do you think about where this card came in?
Well, you just said it's one of the highest insert cards on the list. I'm racking my brain trying to think of any insert card that is more important, more iconic, more sought after than.
To be clear, I'm including parallels in that statement. So not just pure insert cards, but I believe this is actually the highest pure insert card on the list.
And now you've triggered in my brain where I do understand and I do know what will come ahead of this later on this list. And I think that's more than fair. Yeah, as you said, I do love this card, Adam. And you're partially responsible for that. I had never seen one in hand until I met you in person at the 2019 National in Chicago. I was aware of the card. I knew that it was important, something that I would strive to own one day. I never thought I'd ever own one because it was even extremely valuable back then. Relatively speaking, it's become much more valuable now. And when you showed me yours and I got to hold it in hand, I fell in love with it. And I realized that this is a card that, as someone who considers himself, a collector of just a true hobbyist, a true collector, also an investor, and someone who, I just knew that I had to own this card. And I was lucky enough to acquire my copy in January of 2020. And it's become one of my favorite cards, one of my most valuable, and something that I've had people offer to buy. I just had an offer on it at the National last week. And it's easy for me to say no because it's just a beautiful, beautiful card.
Well, I would say no if somebody offers on it for two reasons. One is that I just love the card. I think it's, as evidenced by all of the voting here, it is clearly, it is clearly an iconic card. But the other reason, by the way, my vote on this was 57. So I know people think, oh, you're always going to rank your cards really high. No, I had it lower, but it's because you don't want to let your sort of like owning something sort of dictate how you think about it. So I had it a little bit, I had it a little bit lower. But the other reason that I wouldn't sell it if I was you is you have one of, I've mentioned this before, but you have one of the nicest copies in the world. Yours is not only a BGS 9.5, but it has some premium subs. It's a true gem with some premium subs, and there's only a few of those in existence. So I don't want to like pump your specific copy up too much. That's not what this video is about, but like, you're not going to find a nicer one of those cards. The thing about this card that I think a lot of people don't realize is, unlike a lot of inserts and parallels from the 90s, it's actually not super condition sensitive. There's a lot of 9s, there's a lot of 9.5s. Most of them are in pretty good condition. And so to find one that's that little bit extra good condition that you have, I think is pretty special.
No, I appreciate that. And I'm with you on that. What I love about the card, and I have mine here, of course, a couple of things. MJ he's jumping off the card. When you look at this card, it's almost like, like you could pull him off.
Yep.
And then put him back on. Like
he sits above the card almost when you look at it.
Just like he played above the rim, right? I mean, it's like you have this lenticular background, the orange and the green. He's in the beautiful red uniform. He's in the air. He's about to score, The other thing I love about this card is that it was so unique for its time. It was ahead of its time. You had Gene and Earl from Arena Designs who designed it, came up with the name, all these different things, the stock that they decided to use. Again, this was revolutionary. And in a way, this card represents that whole creative era, as I refer to it as, that second half of the 1990s. There's so many wonderful, rare inserts and parallels from that era. This is the one that represents them all. And that's what iconic means. When you represent something else, you represent the whole population. And this card to me represents the inserts of the 90s, which nowadays all the card companies they're trying to reproduce that time. And I just, I was looking at some cards at the National when I was there in Atlantic City, and they don't make cards like this anymore. They just don't. So, you would think that the card companies continue to evolve since the late 90s. They have in other ways, RPAs, pulled autos, patches, this and that. But this card, if this were to come out today and didn't come out back then, it would be a showstopper. So the fact that it's already 25 years old,
yeah,
it's mind blowing how awesome it is. And it's one of those cards where, if you want to have cards that represent different eras of history and card making, and again, Gene and Earl from Arena Designs, they're legends in our hobby. This is a great way to represent them in your collection.
I can feel like your passion for this card, like emanating through the screen. And it's awesome to me because I feel the same way, right? Like how you described Gene and Earl sort of like starting with this very like this trying to be, amazingly creative and pulling out all of the stops, like just trying to figure out everything you can do with a card. That's what this is, right? They started with the craziest stock in the world, the lenticular design. They put this black border on it, and they have Jordan sort of stretched across diagonally across the whole card, right? He's floating above the card. It's printed like he is above the card. Then you add to it, it's die cut. You add to it the gold stamping that's on the card. And then, the image of Jordan it's perfect. It extends from the black border to the black border. You do have those centering issues on this one that you kind of have to worry about. And then you add to it that on the back, you get this beautiful blue with this perfect write-up. And to me, like, I'm totally biased here. I'm completely biased. It's one of my favorite cards. But to me, this card, I'm just going to say it, I think it's one of the best basketball cards ever made. I think it's one of the best cards ever made. I look at it and I'm like, this is the perfect card. Then lastly, combine that with this, Jeremy. You're pulling one Jambalaya card in every 30 boxes, and there's 15 cards in the set, which means you're going to go through, what is that, 450 boxes of cards before you ever hit a Michael Jordan. And it's like, it's just amazing. It's one of those cards where I'm like, I'm proud that I own this card. Like, I'm glad that this is in my collection. I know that it's like a huge amount of money now. And the reason that I haven't sold it is because I just love it. Like, I just love the card.
Yeah, you're proud. We're privileged to own a copy of it. It's a very important piece. And, Gene and Earl keep coming up. And I saw Gene at the National in Atlantic City earlier this month. And she did inform me that Earl passed away recently, just in the last couple of months. So with that, that's the end of that sort of era. Obviously it's 25 years since they created this card. She's back in the hobby. She's doing some work with Upper Deck now. And I said to her, Earl was helping you with these new Upper Deck stuff, cards, projects you're working on. She said, yes. So, it's an interesting thing. We often, Bill Russell just passed away, and then there's a rush on his cards. You see prices going up at the National. As soon as the word spread, people were turning Bill Russell cards upside down because they weren't sure what to do with them. When a designer of a card, someone who conceived the idea, passes away, does that have an impact? And it's kind of awkward to talk about, and I'm not even sure if you want to talk about this, but I think it's noteworthy, if nothing else, and condolences to Gene and their daughter and their family and friends. It's sad, but it's attached to this, and this being probably the number one card that they ever produced.
I didn't know that, and you sort of just broke that news to me right now. I'm sad to hear that too. I didn't know Earl, so I've never talked to Earl. I've talked to Gene several times, and definitely condolences to her and to their family. But I think the sort of legacy that they left, at least in this part of their life, that Earl left in this part of his life, is one that enables him to be remembered and is something really for his family to be proud of, because here you and I are just going on about this card that we both love. It's one of my favorite cards in my collection. It's one of your favorites and yours. I only own, I think it's 4 cards on the whole list, maybe 5. And this is one that, again, it's worth enough money that it could make a difference in my life. It's worth a lot, but I've elected to keep it because I love it. And that's what card collecting is all about, is you see some of these things rise in value, but you just say, it's an important part of my collection, and I can't replace that if I ever sell it. And especially for a card that's not like, it's not like a card there's only 10 of. There's a few hundred of these, right? So it's just a special one, and I'm glad for where it ended up on the list. Do you have any last thoughts on this one, Jeremy?
Just that, again, when I saw Jean at the show, I gave her a big hug when she told me the news. And I just had said, it's probably the most important card that they ever did together, but I don't think I was correct in that. I think there's another card to come on this list. I'm quite confident that is likely the most important, but this is definitely a top 2 or 3 card to come out of the 90s in all sports. I think completely. What you're referencing is, this is the most iconic insert that they ever made. But there is a more iconic card that they made, and it is a parallel. And yes, it is still to come on the list. And so we will hit that sometime soon. We'll see when. But until tomorrow, again, Jeremy, thank you for taking the time to walk us through the history of the Jambalaya from EX-2001, number 39 on the list. Tomorrow we will hit another very iconic card in the hobby, and look forward to covering that with another guest. And until tomorrow, happy collecting.